BlogTalk Radio.
Welcome to Hell is for Children, a Blog Talk Radio program for and by protective mothers with your host, Geerte Franken. So what's a protective mother? A protective mother tries to protect her child or children from their abusive father by many means necessary. Yes, you can call in. Are you ready? Operation Expose continues.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hey everybody, and welcome to Hell is for Children. And this show is on every Saturdays at 12 noon Eastern Standard Time. But I'm very happy to announce that the show will be moving to CCN Live TV from next week on. And then the time will change to 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, which is 8 p.m. Central European Time. So check my Facebook timeline for announcements to upcoming shows. And you can also check my website, www.freejasmijn.com, which is spelled FREEJASMIJN.com, to check out a post that I will put on there tomorrow or something, in which I will announce the transfer to CCN Live TV. And I'd like to use this opportunity to thank CCN Live TV for allowing us with that opportunity, and a big thank you to Pat Benatar for allowing us to use her song as the theme song and supporting our cause. And of course, I would also like to thank Bobby Biesinger from World Integrity News Network for providing us with the Blog Talk Radio version of the show since February of this year, and for allowing anyone who has input on the topic of protective mothers and can think along with us towards solutions to have their voice heard. So today's guest is British protective mother Helene Falconer, who lost custody of her daughter to her abusive, drug-using ex in New Zealand via the Hague Convention. Let's see if Helene is on. Hi, Helene. Can you hear me?
Hi, Goethe. Thanks for having me on.
Hi. Welcome to being on Hell is for Children. Can you share with the audience what happened to you as a protective mom and how you and your daughter came to be in the situation you're both in today? Because your daughter is in New Zealand now, yes? And you're in England.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct. So for me and my family, my daughter was, I'm going to use the word, torn away from me 4 years ago now. So time has gone on. Even calling in today, it brings back the emotions that I felt at the time, and I feel kind of a bit the anxiety and the emotions coming back to me. But overall, life has gone on, and we're living with the situation it is now, and it's, I guess it's as okay as it can be. But going back to the beginning, I met my ex-partner, who's a Kiwi national, in London, and he was doing a 2-year work visa, and I guess I saw this exotic Kiwi guy, and I thought, hey, you seem really nice, and we got to know each other, and I got pregnant very quickly. I was only with him 3 months when I got pregnant.
Wow.
I was 29 when I got pregnant, 30 when I had her, and, I was overjoyed to be pregnant. I'd always wanted a family. I was really thrilled, really enjoyed my pregnancy, and, I guess as much as it kind of sickens me to say it now, at the time I was in love, and I'm a bit of a romantic, and I had lots of hopes and dreams for the future. So my daughter was born in May 2007 in London, and, it was great. We saw my family quite a lot, and we had made plans to move to New Zealand because my partner's visa was only a 2-year working holiday visa. He wasn't looking to renew it. He wanted to return back home. And I was willing to go and move to New Zealand. That's how I felt. I felt very open to going. I thought it would be exciting. I thought it would be a brilliant opportunity for us all. And ultimately, when the father says, well, I'm going back to New Zealand, I wanted my child to have a father. I wanted us to all be a family unit. So, I thought it was a reasonable compromise. However, I did say to him, and I felt we agreed, if it doesn't work out, I will want to come home to England with our daughter. But, we never did any pre-nuptial agreement or anything like that. It was just conversations that we'd had. But I guess, like many people, you just go for it. You just think, let's move. You have rose-tinted glasses anyway. So we moved when my daughter was 6 months old. It was December 2007. We arrived in New Zealand. And, it's kind of a big deal because you're moving country, you have a little baby, and it was really stressful. It was really, really stressful at the time. Yeah. And, we were arguing a bit before we left the UK, but I put it down to, the stresses of life. Right. And, I know not everybody gets on perfectly, that's life, but upon coming to New Zealand, it just got worse and worse, and it became a bit nasty. That this obviously this was over a period of time, but after 6 months, I felt New Zealand wasn't for me. I really missed my family. I missed home, and I guess I wasn't prepared for that. When you have a young baby, I think as a mother, you feel drawn to be with your own family. And his family didn't live anywhere near us. We lived in Wellington. They all lived miles and miles away. We didn't see them very often. So it was like a 6-hour drive to go and see them. And we argued badly. It wasn't any fun. And he said, well, give it a year, things might be different in a year. And I thought, what, that's a fair enough comment, isn't it? A year's nothing. Yeah, sure, I'll give it a year. But things didn't get any better. If anything, they got worse. And I really tried. I really, really, really did try to make things okay, but
it's a lot of changes too, right? I mean, you're moving from England to New Zealand, and you're having a baby. That's a lot of big changes in your life.
Yeah, it is, and I guess I was a bit naive. I don't know, but I certainly didn't realise the implications of moving abroad with a child, and the fact that I wouldn't be able to bring her home. I didn't have a clue about that.
Right,
it may sound
thinking of that, right?
Yeah, it may sound presumptive, as a mother, but I suppose the culture that I've grown up in, being British, I've been used to the fact that when relationships split up, it's usually the mum that gets the primary care role of children, generally speaking. And I know that's very generalised, and it's not the same for all families, but I kind of had that idea in my mind, and I felt safe in that. But obviously the reality, that isn't the case at all. And the reality did really shock me. So over this year, he smoked a lot of pot. That was the drug that he used. And I know marijuana is considered fairly soft. It wasn't anything like heroin or cocaine, but he smoked a lot of pot, and I think that altered his mood. So sometimes he would get extremely angry, sometimes in my view, very lazy about seeking employment. We were living off my savings. Looking back, there were all these fuses going on, and it didn't help. We had the neighbours called the police out about 6 times over the year because they heard arguments, banging. The police were very concerned. he did an anger management course as a result of the police recommending that he did that. Anyway, I did a year, and I said, you know, I've tried. I want to go home. I need to go home. I cannot function here any longer. And he said, well, you can go home, but you leave the baby here. And I said, no, but I'm her mum. I'm her primary caregiver. You know, no, that's not going to happen. You know, I'm happy for you to be her dad, and I know it won't be the same, but I need to take my child home. I need to go back to my old life. And I thought, well, you know, I'm going to do things the proper legal way. I will go to see a solicitor. In America, you might call that an attorney, but I'm going to see a solicitor, and I'm going to seek advice. And at that point in time, again, this might shock you, but I was quite confident that they would see that I'm a sensible, hard-working, great mum, you know, compared to the alternative of leaving my child with her in the sole custody of her father. I thought it was a really obvious that in the best interest of the child, it'd be better that she remains with the mother. But, you know, as I found out, that is really not the case. Also, during this year that I was in New Zealand, I ended up going to the doctor and being on antidepressants because I found it so stressful and so upsetting, and all the things that go along with it. Gosh, when I'm talking about it now, thinking about how I felt then, you know, I felt incredibly low, and my ex was picking on my self-confidence and my self-esteem and telling me so many negative things, that nobody in New Zealand liked me. You know, why didn't I do the world a favour and die? Our daughter didn't need me. You know, it wasn't so much physical, it was mental. And because I was there, I felt, you know, on my own without any established friends and family, you really, you know, it's very damaging. You can take it to heart, and I felt like a shell of a person. Anyway, I went to visit a New Zealand solicitor, and, you know, they said, oh, no, you won't, you know, you won't be able to go home. And I said, but these are all the valid reasons. You know, I have a career at home, I have family at home, I have, you know, more opportunities. The child will have, you know, I felt more opportunities. I would never sever relationships with her father. I would be facilitating towards that and pay. And they said, no, your child's habitually resident. You know, you can't take her home. Anyway, I went through all the court processes to give myself the best chance. You know, again, this is, you know, I hadn't done anything wrong legally. I did it all by the book. And basically I was told I had no chance of taking my child back. We did some court psychology reports. So it's where a court psychologist comes out to your home. They view your child with you, the child with their father. They go to at the time my daughter was at nursery. They went and visited her at her nursery because she was 2 at this point. And I thought, well, you know, they will see that my daughter has been affected by this and that she, you know, is happiest with me. I did take some recordings of when my ex was very abusive towards me and also abusive verbally to our daughter. But it all ended up, in this psychologist's eyes, making me look like the bad person, which I found absolutely devastating. So these recordings, they said that I was underhanded and I could have provoked him into saying these things to me and things to my daughter. So, for instance, we had a changeover and I said, bye, Lily, you know, love you. And, of course, the daughter cried because she's, oh, Mummy's going, bye. You know, children do at that age. Yep. And they said, you know, by me saying, bye, Lily, love you, that was provoking her into a reaction that would make him cross. You know, everything was picked apart, and it's so demoralising. It's so upsetting. And, of course, an abusive ex thinks, you know, this is good. See, everyone's on my side. No one believes you. No one believes your stories of abuse. And you know what? he's kind of right, because none of the court personnel took it seriously. The other things in this report, they wouldn't let me have a copy of this report, and I wasn't allowed to discuss it with third parties. And I found some of the things that it contained were really awful, because I felt really confident that they would say, yes, Miss Falconer was a really good mum, but they used things like on the psychological visit, I was making some cupcakes with my daughter, and I said, what should we put in it? Should we put in chopped chips, or should we put in raisins, or we can put in dried apricots? And they said that I offered her too much choice for her age, and I wasn't in touch with her needs.
My goodness.
And I made lunch for us, and she ate it, and we chatted, but they didn't really say much about that. Alternatively, when our daughter was with her father, she sat in his lap and had some food out of a lunchbox, and they said, the father was refueling her with food, and nurture, because she was sitting on his lap eating out of a lunchbox. So they glossed things on his side, but they completely ripped anything apart for me, and I was absolutely gobsmacked. And the other bit that really shell-shocked me was that they said if our daughter Lily was to relocate back to the UK, it would upset her father so much that it might affect his marijuana smoking and make it worse, and that would be detrimental to him, considering the whole point is that it is supposed to be about the best interests of the child. But it did recognise that our daughter Lily they wrote down that she appeared as an unhappy, introverted child that had attachment issues to both her parents. And I guess in these situations where there's parental conflict, this is a really sad result. I don't think any parent wants that for their child, but this is what happens. And I was just so depressed by this report. I was absolutely floored by it. And I had a discussion with my solicitor, and I said, this is awful. Can I complain? And they said, no, you can't complain. No, this particular psychologist is very well thought of in the New Zealand family courts, They absolutely not. And I said, well, look, can we do another one in 6 months' time? And because the court report recommended that I do a parenting course, which I did, and it was a 12-week course, and I did that. So I got another report in about 6 months. I think it was 6 months or 9 months later, thinking it would be a bit, be better, because I'd already done one before, and it was slightly better, but it was still slamming me, and I was told, no way, I wouldn't have a chance of relocating back home with my child. I just wouldn't. And I guess I became so upset and so desperate. I needed to go home for my own sanity, because, every drop-off, every pickup, my ex would cause, arguments in front of our child. It would leave her, he'd lock her in the car while she was crying for me whilst this conflict played out. And even when I completely acted, like a statue, I didn't react to what he was saying, I was trying to be calm, he would still keep going, and he was so loud, and it distressed her. And, I tried every approach, and I asked my solicitor if I could have a protection order so that we didn't have to see each other in the crossovers when my daughter was going to her father or coming back to me. And of course, when you apply for relocation, they don't recommend that, because the courts will see that as one parent blocking the other parent, and that is not favourable for relocating. So it was a case of I had to put up with it because I wanted to give myself the best chance of relocating. But ultimately, through this whole process, from start to finish, I was no better off to when I first started. But for me, I knew I was getting to the point where I was feeling suicidal. I felt very, very alone. I couldn't go on like that day to day. It's no good for our child. And I just needed a break. I just needed to get out of there because I couldn't cope any longer.
Yeah, it sounds like you have no support whatsoever over there. No one on your side to take care of you in all of this.
Yeah, I did make some lovely friends. I did, and for that I'm completely grateful to them. And I became better friends with them after I separated from my partner, and they were absolute lifelines. But it's not the same as my family and the people I know at home. The people I know at home I've known for such a long time. They know I'm not a bad person. They know I'm not a bad mum. They know that I love my daughter, despite what that psychological report might suggest. Mm-hmm. But it just feels like they're trying to justify any reason they can to keep your child there.
Yeah.
You know? And anyway, my father wasn't feeling very well. My father at this point was like 78, and he was feeling unwell, and I knew I needed to come home because, you know, my father needed me. And I'd said this previously to the solicitors and the courts, but of course, even if your parents aren't well, it's not an interest to the courts. They don't care about the wider family. That's of no significance in child relocating. It's not. But anyway, I said to my ex, well, I knew what to do. If I said to him, I need to go home because my father's unwell, I'm going to take Lily with me, he'd say, no, you're not. No, she's staying here. So I said to him, I need to go home to England. My father's not very well, but you'll be all right looking after Lily, won't you? And he said, how dare you? I'm not looking after your child. What do you think I am, a babysitting service? You've got to take her with you. And I thought, oh, good. But because I'd known this, I knew the way he'd been working, so it worked. So I took her home with me. And every day I was home, I knew when I left that I couldn't come back. I knew in the core of my very being, I thought I can't go back there because I will end up doing something stupid like committing suicide because I'm so depressed. And that's no good to our daughter. That's no good to anybody. You know, what a waste. And, you know, but we came back and I made the best of every single day, and it was great. And I knew it would probably be short-lived, and it was. But I think for both myself and Lily, we sort of got on with like a normal life without that degree of conflict. You know, just normal things like going to the park and enjoying the sunshine and, you know, seeing my father and my mother. My parents separated when I was a child, but I'm remaining close to both of them. But ultimately, I got back in November, and my father did die in January, unfortunately. And well, you know, he was an old. He got elderly, and I'm really glad that I did come back and was able to spend some time with him before he died.
Absolutely.
But it was. Obviously, I'd been facilitating Skype contact between my daughter and her father, so, you know, he'd spoken to her. And, of course, he was saying, when you're coming back, your father's died, when you're coming back. And I said, well, I've got to arrange the funeral because I'm an only child. So, you know, the responsibility of that fell onto me, which was exactly what, you know, I needed to do. I needed to arrange my father's funeral. And he said, no, you come and bring the daughter back, and then you can go back for the funeral. And I said, well, I'm not working, you know, I can't do that. But ultimately, my father had his funeral, and that very night, the police called at the door, and they served me with Hague Convention papers.
Oh, my God, the timing. Jeez.
Yeah, I know. And, of course, Lily's father had been saying on the Skype and on the phone, you know, I'm going to get you in jail. I'm going to get the police round. You know, you're going to prison. And, of course, these police turn up. Now, Lily at the time was 4. She was, you know, emotionally really stressed, very distressed about it. And so I'm shaky, but you know, I want my daughter Lily to be calm and, you know, reassure her. And it was just a really difficult time. So I guess I'd been gone since November. That was February the 15th, my father's funeral. So he did implement the Hague Convention quite rapidly, which I knew would probably happen. You know, I just, maybe part of me was hoping that he would think what was best for our daughter and come to some sort of agreement, or, you know, he wasn't willing to do any mediation. I tried to get him to do some mediation around it, and historically, even before, when I was applying for relocation from New Zealand, he wasn't willing to do mediation then. But I'd hoped perhaps he would change his mind, but he didn't. So by this point, I felt sick to my stomach. I felt a bag of nerves. I felt really scared. Mm-hmm. But at least I had my family and friends where I was. And I went down to the Royal Courts of Justice in London about 3 times, and fortunately I got legal aid. But I got a very good solicitor, and you do get different barristers on different days. So they know a bit about your case, but, you know, they don't know as much as you do. And during these cases, you actually don't talk. They talk for you. But even though I discussed about the level of abuse that I've had, and I had the tape recordings, I had neighbours write statements, I had, you know, various bits of evidence, but it wasn't enough to prevent my daughter being returned to New Zealand. It has to be extremely severe, as in they've tried to murder the child. You know, even if they've tried to murder me, which didn't happen in my case, but, you know, even if he'd tried to murder me, they would still have sent the child back, because the child hasn't had any, you know, strong enough abuse towards the child. You know, and it's really scary. I read some of the cases at the time about, you know, a woman who had an attempted murder from her children's father, and the children were still returned to their father, and she couldn't go back because she was scared for her life. And I just thought, you know, this is bonkers. Mm-hmm. This is absolutely bonkers. I had no idea. I just thought family courts would be more reasonable. Mm-hmm. But anyway, the long and the short of it is that the court said that my daughter had to be returned, and therefore, as the mother, you know, you don't want to not be with your child. They assume that you're going to go as well. And I was told that I could live in a women's refuge. And basically, it's almost like they want to wash their hands of you, because the Hague Convention states that the country of habitual residence must decide whether the child can permanently relocate elsewhere. Well, I had the previous knowledge, because I'd tried it the legal route twice before. I knew they would never grant it. But now, of course, I had the label of illegally retaining my child, so that wasn't going to do me any favours. I knew setting foot in New Zealand would not be of any benefit to anybody. Mm-hmm. And I was really scared. I was scared of setting foot back there. I just couldn't do it. And I didn't want my daughter to see all the conflict again. And basically her father came in the May, and it was 2 days after her 5th birthday, and came and collected her. And it was a horrible thing to go through. And I know I'm not the only person that's gone through it, but at the time it's just unbelievable. But, you know, as much as every bone in your body says, no, you know, I'm not going to be parted from my child. You know, my child needs me. At the same time, it's the law. The law is saying your child must be returned to New Zealand. So we met in a solicitor's office in a place called Grantham in the UK. And that's where the changeover was going to be. And her father came, and he was in a separate room. And the solicitors were trying to, I suppose, solicitors or social workers, their job was to try and remove my child from me. And Lily was 5. She'd just turned 5, and she was crying and screaming. And one of my friends that came with me for support recorded this. And you can't see her, but you can hear her. Mm-hmm. And she was gripping onto my top for dear life, saying, no, I want to be with my mummy, I don't want to go. And, they don't want you to show too much emotion because it's going to upset your child. And they didn't want to physically unpick her fingers from my top because they can't intervene. They can't physically, potentially I suppose they could physically damage your child if they were to be too firm. So they said, no, you have to unpick your child's fingers from your top. And every bone in my body was like, no, I'm not. But I had to do it. I had to do it, and it was just awful. It's almost like the worst dream you can have. She was crying. It became quite a lot, and I said, I need to, go outside for a minute. He said, fine, go outside. And of course, I came back in after composing myself, and they said, no, you can't go back in now. She's Lily's fine. If you go back in there, you're going to upset her. And I said, but I haven't said goodbye to her. And they said, no, sorry, you can't. But I have to say, every social worker in that place was in tears because it's not something that they see every day. It's kind of out the box, a situation like this. And they all had tears in their eyes because I think deep down, although it's the law, they know that on many levels, in a human way, it's wrong. Mm-hmm. It's wrong on some levels, and it's something that has to be done. But
yeah.
But a good friend of mine came over that night to sort of, sit with me because I was in such an emotional state. I needed, my friend stayed with me at my mum's and was kind of being my support, my shoulder to cry on. I felt like an absolute zombie. Mm-hmm. Part of my soul had been ripped away. And I said, I need to go and say goodbye to my daughter properly, and I knew when her flight was going to be the next day out of Heathrow. And I said, I need to say goodbye to her. I feel it's wrong that I wasn't allowed to say goodbye to her. So we drove down to Heathrow, and I saw her before they were boarding, in the check-in area. And she saw me, and she was like, Mummy, Mummy, and she was so happy to see me. And I did keep it together for her. And I said, Mummy loves you very, very much, and you mean the world to me, and don't think that Mummy's ever forgotten you, and I will see you again. And she said, Mummy, come with us. And I said, I can't. And I know how utterly selfish that sounds, because, if as a mum, of course you're going to go with your child, but I knew if I went, I'd be signing my own death sentence because I wouldn't cope. I'd end up being bullied by my ex into suicide. Life would just be awful. I couldn't let her see all that conflict. And I said, I can't, but I will see you again. And that day I applied through the Central Authority to have access, future access, holiday access to her. And that's a horrible year of waiting because it took 13 months. But, of course, it has to be heard in the New Zealand courts. But I didn't know at that point if I would see her again, when I would see her again, whether communication would be upheld. Because my ex being my ex is quite controlling and bullying, he could have easily have severed contact, and I knew that. But I got it the following year in the June, and I was able to go over to see her for a holiday. I had to pay a large, call it, bond to the New Zealand family courts, just in case I'm a flight risk now. So if I was ever to retain her again, it's enough money for her father to come over and collect her. Not that I would have any.
Did you have any contact with her? Did you have any contact with her in the first year while you were waiting for that?
I did have some. Yes, fortunately, I have some. Now, I took a friend with me that day to the social worker's office in Grantham when my daughter was, taken from me. My friend is actually a solicitor, although she wasn't my solicitor, and she wasn't acting at the time because she has young children of her own. But my ex didn't know that. And she said, right, when it comes to Skypes and phone calls, Lily needs to be in touch with her mum. So let's say Wednesday and Sunday, Lily will Skype. And he thought she was an official solicitor, so he said, well, okay. And fortunately, he did. And I feel very lucky for that. Skypes over that time were, I suppose, because the emotions are still quite raw for her father, and he feels very, very angry towards me. Skypes could sometimes be very difficult. He struggled to keep out of it, and he would be in the screen and often commenting, and it didn't help. But he's being the way he is, he felt he had to make his point known, and he made that point many, many times at the expense of doing it in front of our daughter. But it was really, it's hard sometimes. But I went to see Lily after 16 months of being separated from her, and I suppose it's something that I'd been longing for such a long time, but I was very nervous about setting foot in New Zealand because I didn't know if anything would happen. Would some officials come and, I don't know, tell me off for illegally retaining my daughter in the UK? I didn't know. Fortunately, that didn't happen, but I was scared of that. But at the same time, I wanted to see my daughter, and we holidayed in New Zealand, and it was lovely, but so much time had passed for her. It'd been 16 months. She was bigger. She still looked like her, but she had changed. And that bond between us, yes, it had been affected. Of course it's going to be affected after 16 months. Fortunately, because she was nearly 7 at that point, it's quite easy to start building it back up again at that age. But, leaving, saying goodbye to her again, just brought it all back at the end of the 2-week holiday. It's really tough, but I knew, for me, and it's just my situation, but I would rather see Lily on holidays. And her, she's able to come on holiday here, although that's another story because sometimes, my ex makes it seem difficult. He says, no, she's not coming, and gives out various reasons why she's not coming. But at the end of the day, so far, at the last minute, he says, okay, she can come. But of course, it's very stressful. But for me, I'd rather Lily saw me happy and together and having a life and building up resources for her when she's older. I think that's better for my child than if I was there where she saw me being broken and her father saying awful things to me or, just being in the middle of it. I don't think that would help her. And it's really hard. It's unimaginable to say that I could do that. And if someone said when Lily was a baby, could you ever imagine not having her when she's 5? I'd be no, of course not. I'm her mum, but that's the way it's worked out. And it is hard. It will always be hard. But that's how our lives have panned out. And I suppose I'm lucky compared to some people that I do see my child in a fairly predictable way. Admittedly, sometimes it's once or twice a year, but at least I know I will see her again. And she knows that as well. Even when her father says, no, you're not going, or he tries to reinforce negative stories about me. That's what my daughter's told me. He makes memories of me a very bad thing. And then he used that to say Lily doesn't want to come. But she will work out as she gets older, and we will build on our holidays so that she knows that she has a nice time and that Mummy loves her, even though it's not, a normal mummy-daughter relationship. But, I would have her back in a heartbeat. I would love to have her here living with me, but, it's... Unfortunately, the law states because I went over there for more than 3 months, she is habitually resident of New Zealand. And, I didn't realise at the time. Now, if I had have known that, if I'd had hindsight, my God, I never would have gone. I never would have gone, believe me. It's been a very emotionally upsetting, not just to myself and Lily, but, to the families on both sides. It's been awful. And, financially, oh, my God, the thousands and thousands and thousands that, my family spent helping me to basically get nowhere, I wouldn't recommend it.
So do you have any Skype contact with your daughter on a regular basis now between those vacations?
I wouldn't call it regular. I wouldn't call it regular. And I feel that her father picks and chooses when she can Skype. And often he will say, well, you have to do X, Y, and Z before she can Skype you. He's all about putting me on the back foot so that I have to somehow prove myself, so that I'm worthy of Skyping our daughter. It's a weird mentality, and I don't think I'm alone in people that have exes who are also like that. But he does that a lot, and I've had to sometimes. This has come with years of experience, but I used to jump. If he said jump, I would jump because I'd be so scared. Oh God, he's not going to let me talk to Lily. Whereas now, and I think it's kind of worked better. I go, right, she can Skype you when she wants to. That's how he feels. She knows where I am. And I think he thinks, hang on a minute. And give it a week or two. Funny enough, they Skype me. It's taken me years to be as strong as I am now. But it's very unpredictable. And of that, I'm very sad. I guess he uses Skype contact as a way of, say, blackmailing me or putting me on the back foot. Basically, it's about emotionally hurting me. That's what I think it's about. The same thing as trying to deny these holidays. It's about our daughter having that contact with me. But they do not have internet at home. He basically refuses to get it, so she has to go to internet cafes to Skype me. That it's okay, I guess. It's not ideal, but he, unlike some people, and this is kind of controversial, but I don't pay any child support to my daughter's father because there is no reciprocal agreement between the UK and New Zealand for child support. It doesn't exist, so that cannot be enforced. And the way I see it, and I'm going to sound really negative now, I am willing to look after my daughter. I am more than willing, but I don't believe that if I gave him money, he would spend it on her. I'm happy to pay her school for trips. I'm happy to pay, direct some, an extracurricular activity, but I'm not going to pay it to him. But I think he's trying, by withdrawing Skypes and by saying, well, I can't afford internet, he's trying to somehow get around into me giving him money. And he said that every Skype he takes to, he wants me to pay him X amount of dollars because that will cover his petrol and the internet fee. I don't know. It's an ongoing silly
It's all about
thing.
control. It's all about
control. It is about control.
It's continuing that reign of control over you. And, if he was acting in the best interest of your daughter, none of this would have happened. None of this. He would have let you go home, and you would have both worked out an international visitation arrangement. And any normal human being knows that the child, should be with the primary caregiver, which was you.
I absolutely was. I absolutely was her primary caregiver. Yes, I wanted my daughter to have a father and a relationship with her father, but not at the detriment of me being her mum. It never occurred to me.
No, it's unnatural. This entire situation completely goes against nature.
Yeah.
It's natural for the child to be with the mother, and you were gracious enough to say, like, hey, I'll do anything to keep you in her life.
Yeah.
And had he been anywhere near a normal person, he would have worked with you on that, and for the sake of your daughter, because this is not healthy for your daughter's development.
No,
and he's not thinking about that.
I don't think he's shown these things to our daughter, but he still emails every now and then. He'll write little emails from work, and he'll say things like, "You are a womb. You're not a mother," and I've been mum and dad since 2012. And he will say things about my father, who passed away, saying, "Oh, your father's delusional." Really nasty things. Now, these things used to really, really upset me when I lived in New Zealand. Mm-hmm. Yes, they are upsetting now, but they're not as upsetting. But
you've rebuilt a new life, so that is your strength. And a lot of people who hear your story might not understand that you chose to stay in the UK, but I do, and I have another friend who went through a similar situation as yours, and she also chose to not to go back because she knew that her ex would continue to bully her, and that would be to her psychological detriment. And it's very hard to explain to people who are not victim of narcissists, malignant narcissists,
absolutely,
what that's like to be under someone's... go ahead.
Yeah, people do not have any idea. You might see it on a TV program or a news report about somebody being emotionally, psychologically abusive, but you don't really know what it's like until you've lived it. And it is incredibly damaging. It is just awful. I mean, there was a bit of physical, but on the scale of things, the courts would say it's minor physical abuse. But the emotional is hugely damaging. But interestingly, when I went to see the solicitors for relocation, I explained I had the recordings, I had evidence of the abuse that I'd suffered, and they said that if I wasn't wanting to relocate to the UK and I wanted to stay in New Zealand, yes, I could have applied for a protection order. I was absolutely justified. So yes, they understand abuse on one hand, but it's not counted in the context of wanting to relocate permanently to another country. If anything, it's detrimental against your case because if you want to apply for relocation, your best chance is if you do have a happy co-parenting relationship where you get on okay, you get on well, that sort of arrangement, yes, they can trust one parent to emigrate and maintain relationship with a left-behind parent. Yes, I understand that. But no matter how nice I wanted it to be, he wasn't willing for it to be okay, And also, when you do have a protection order in New Zealand, had lots of discussions about this. Normally it would last about 6 months and then it would come off again. 6 months isn't long enough to really be safe, knowing that it's not going to last for longer. And I knew that, which is why I had no faith in the system. If I was to return with my daughter, if I was to go with her, I had absolutely no faith in that system.
Well, it sounds like you were totally railroaded by those social workers there. So why, if all your experience are negative, why would you go back and deal with that some more? I mean, it's like setting yourself up for disaster. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, I totally understand.
And when I listened to one of your recent broadcasts with Anita Duncan, yes, she did return to America with her children. Or what happened to her is exactly the reasons why I knew going back wouldn't make a blind bit of difference.
Let's explain that to listeners.
I knew
that show because Anita went back. She's also British, and her ex was in the United States, and she was ordered to go back with her children to the United States. And then within 72 hours of her arrival in the United States, the children were taken from her anyway. So it's like these Hague Convention treaties, it doesn't work. It only works for fathers. It seems to be a father's rights deportation treaty from what I'm seeing. Yeah. That doesn't mean that fathers are not also affected. This happens to fathers too, but in much lesser amounts, it seems.
Well, I think if you look at the statistics of the Hague Convention now, it's mostly mothers that are fleeing abusive relationships with either their current partners or their ex-partners. But it's predominantly mothers. That's the way it is now. Obviously, when it was set up in the 80s, I believe, mostly it was fathers who were abducting their children to different countries and mothers that were left behind. But times have changed, and that's not the majority of the people going through it now. But it's scary. And, when I tell people what happened to me, they're like, no, that can't be right. But you're the mother, and he smoked pot, and he didn't have a job, and, all these valid reasons, they find it. They had no idea. And I say, I had no idea too. If I did, I wouldn't have ever put my daughter in that situation because who knows how this is going to affect her as she grows older. I have my own theories and fears how psychologically that's going to affect her. But, nobody wants to put their child in that position.
Absolutely not. And you're totally right. That Hague Convention treaty was started for the opposite purpose, so fathers wouldn't abduct their children to other countries. And now it's turned around. These fathers are using the treaty against us to sever the mother-child bond,
I think it's very easy and very tempting if a father is, a narcissistic sociopathic person who obviously feels their anger's directed at the mother. It's a very easy way for them to exchange their fists or their verbal abuse for the courts, and also it makes them feel more validated. Unfortunately, it's empowering. Now, it's not meant to be for those reasons. The courts are recognising, and rightly so, fathers' rights movements of saying, hey, we're fathers, we have rights to our children too. Absolutely, of course, fathers are very important, but there's a proportion of society that are, quite frankly, sociopathic, narcissistic men that haven't really got their children's best interests at heart, and it's very easy for them to manipulate this law to absolutely wound and hurt the mother, and that's what they're setting out to do. It's not got anything to do with the welfare of their children. That's what, from people I've spoken to in my own experience, that's how I feel.
Because I take it that Anita, through the organization called Global Arc.
Yes, I'm aware of them, yes.
Yeah, because Global Arc works on, informing, future moms or moms who are about to locate to another country about these types of issues. So they are aware that this might happen to them when they move and after they move. Because I think most of us don't realize
it's really important. I'm really pleased. I wish someone had told me before I'd moved.
Exactly.
Before I was served with Hague Convention papers and I was in the UK, I was in touch with a charity called Reunite, who were excellent, and they told me about what was likely to happen when I was served with papers, etc., which was, not nice to hear, but at least I was forearmed. And they said, we've had so many people, mothers fleeing abusive relationships because they've moved to a foreign country. They said that they wanted to contact immigration for different countries to say, look, let's write a pamphlet. Please give this to people moving with children, so that they're aware. And of course, immigration won't, because it's another expense. But they said they'd petitioned to try and get information leaflets included in immigration packs so that at least people were aware. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was an excellent idea, but nope, it doesn't happen. People don't know about it. So the work that Global Art do is in my opinion, very worthwhile.
Very, very crucial work, yes. Let's take a little break. We'll take a little musical break. And then when we come back, we can talk more about what we can do, recommendations that we can make to moms who plan to leave their home country, either to get pregnant in another country or to bring their children to another country. And I wanted to touch up on some other elements of your story as well, because you told it so from your heart, and I think that's really courageous. It's very difficult to go through your own heartbreak like this. So thank you for being so strong to be able to do that. It probably helps that there's been a couple of years between the actual separation between you and your daughter. But nevertheless, that pain is constant. I know it.
It doesn't go away. But no. I'd rather, I do it because I'd rather other people were aware of it. What happened to me and my family is really awful. But the thing is, it could happen to anybody, and people do not know that. It could happen to anybody.
Well, that's why we have to show.
I'd rather awareness was out there.
Yes, that's why that's why I'm doing the show, to raise the awareness around it, and these links of these shows, we can share them. Maybe Global Art will put them on their website so people can listen before they make decisions to move. Maybe they can be shared at, places where people go get their visa to move. I don't know. I'm trying to be part of the brainstorming process of how to raise awareness around it, and how to get, change the Hague Convention and the implementation of it, and the role of the central authority. So let's talk about that a little bit when we come back after the break.
Okay.
All right? Okay.
All right.
So we'll play our theme song from Pat Benatar that she's so graciously allowing us to use for the program, and I'll see you on the other side. And welcome back to Hell is for Children. I've been talking to Helene Falconer, who is a British protective mother, and she lost custody of her daughter to her abusive ex, who lives in New Zealand. And this has been going on for 4 years already. And Helene did a really great job explaining how she got to this situation she's in today with her daughter. So, Helene, I was thinking during the break, you brought up a really good point about when you had to go back to the UK when your father was sick. I actually went through the same exact situation. My mom got sick, and I had to go back to take care of her. And then while we were in the Netherlands, my daughter disclosed that her father had been sexually abusing her, and and that adds another dimension to my particular situation. But what's interesting is that the Hague Convention doesn't look at domestic violence, any type of psychological abuse, any type of child abuse. They only look at jurisdiction, and I think this is really this is the main point where we need to put pressure on the United Nations to change, to reform the Hague Convention. Don't you agree?
Absolutely. If I speak to any person, friends or people I've just met, and I will say about the degree of abuse from other cases that I've heard as well as my own, that's not common sense. You can't return a child to that. That would never happen I know I'm from Britain, but they'll say that will never happen in Britain. Well, the reality is actually it could do, and it definitely happens in other countries because I've seen the cases. I've read the backgrounds. I've spoken to these mums. Yep. And it's frightening, and it is not in the best interest for the children. It's not. And I know that in the New Zealand courts, they don't take the opinion of young children. They often don't take the opinion until they're at least 14 years old. And I think that they should take the opinion of children much younger. And I think it's incredibly damaging for that child. It really will be... the level of abuse is a life sentence for some of these children, and that's not in their best interests. Exactly. It's really not. It's not common sense. But you ask anybody in the public, any average person, that morally they'll say, no, that's not right. That can't be right. It boggles the mind.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. The psychological abuse is used. The manipulative, narcissistic, malignant fathers will use the Hague Convention as a tool, as a coercive tool. And I actually wrote something about that yesterday. What I wrote is that, what these fathers do is they'll allow the mothers and the children to return to the home country of the mother. And then after a few months, they'll suddenly change their mind and accuse the mothers of child abduction. And then there's a Hague Convention case. We know they don't implement Article 13. All these children are then deported back to the country of the father, and the mother is now suddenly made out to be a child abductor in the father's country, so she often cannot even return. I mean, in your case, you could have returned, but a lot of moms can't even return anymore.
No.
And then they
the ones where their visas are revoked is just heartbreaking. Their visas don't exist anymore, so they couldn't return even if they wanted to. I mean, it's bonkers. Yeah. That's the issue I had too. My green card has expired. People say, why don't you go back? I'm like, well, first of all, I've been labeled as a child abductor now, and my visa, and I don't have a green card anymore, so what am I supposed to do? It's ridiculous. And this is definitely not in the best interest of my daughter. I don't even know where she is or whether she's even still alive. It's getting to that point. And let's talk about that particular part, because the central authority, in your case, you applied for access, Article 21 of the Hague Convention Treaty, taking you more than a year to get that set up. I mean, that's ridiculous. That should be set up within 3 days. I mean, how long does it take to set up a Skype conversation, That was very, it's like living on a knife edge, because you don't know if they're going to grant you holidays. I know that my ex-partner was certainly, all the paper he sent through was no holidays. Absolutely not. Lily's not going anywhere till she's 16 or 18. That's what he was coming in with. So, normal people could discuss it, but obviously I'm unable to do that with my daughter's father, so I have to rely on courts and the central authority. But, it took 13 months, and it is... I wouldn't wish that on anybody. It really is awful waiting. I know there's worse situations I could be in, but it's really, really hard. And it must have been hard for my daughter knowing when and if she was going to see her mum again. That's not in the best interest of the child, is it?
Absolutely not. These children grow up with abandonment issues. They grow up trusting adults. They get fed a bunch of nonsense about us. Usually the fathers will tell the children that we are dangerous or that we're crazy. know,
Yeah.
And how is that in the best interest of the child? You know, they try to just discard us with the trash, but there's only one mother.
Mm-hmm.
That child only has one mother, and you know, we are it. So they can try and damage our reputation, but how is that healthy for the child? The child is identifying for 50% with the mother and 50% with the father. Yeah. So I believe...
But men like this don't see it. They honestly, they don't see it. It's sad, but they don't understand. They are so consumed with their own agenda and getting their revenge that they just don't see it. And you hope that one day they will. But
no, they won't. I mean, narcissism is a personality disorder, and if you look at research on narcissism, I think only 2% actually ever is able to overcome that through lots of therapy and lots of I don't know what they do with people with those kind of disorders.
Years ago.
You cannot reach them.
My daughter's father.
I tried everything. You cannot communicate with people like that. You know, they have no more contact to their hearts. They don't have any empathy. They're it's almost like they're not human. You know, that sounds odd, but seriously, that's how I look at it.
No. And you know,
that's one thing,
I can tell you a whole list of personality traits that my daughter's father possessed that, you know, are frankly really scary.
Yes.
But he's gotten away with it. You know, I've seen him do some really awful things, but to other people, I'll think that he's really nice because he is nice to them.
That's the mask. You know? Yeah, that's the mask.
Yeah, it's a mask.
But the thing is that the folks of the central authority and these courts, they're not looking at any of this. So they believe the mask, you know, and they're facilitating the narcissist with stealing our children from us. And so, you know, some people say we need to train the judges, we need to train the central authority. I think that when I look at your case and my case, when the Hague Convention is used as a way of coercive control, if a father bargains with contact or withholds contact, that should be reason to reverse custody because it has detrimental consequences.
It's another form of abuse.
Yes, exactly. It's abuse by proxy. It's continued, and now it's facilitated by the courts. So one of the things that I am trying to achieve is to get the United Nations to form a multidisciplinary judicial oversight committee through which proper and equal implementation of the treaty across all the participating countries can be guaranteed. What are your thoughts on that? I think the way that
different countries, I think that's excellent because I do believe that different countries will translate aspects of the Hague Convention in different ways. The way that Britain would read a certain clause or article of the Hague Convention is translated in a different way that another country would. And there needs to be some consistency between all the different countries. And I think, you know, for me, when I was talking about the life that we could have in the UK versus New Zealand, they weren't, the New Zealand courts weren't concerned about that. And certainly the UK weren't willing to get involved because I made several phone calls and I said, look, you know, can you help? Well, no, you're not on British soil. It's the New Zealand's case to deal with. Yes, but I'm British and my daughter's British. Yeah, but it's not up to us. Are you still there or have I lost you? You are, yeah.
No, I'm listening to you. I'm thinking, you know, that's a really excellent point because, in my particular case, the Dutch government actually told parliaments about my case that they have their own treaty. They have their own policy. It's called First Return the Child, Then Talk. And that's completely, that has nothing to do with the Hague Convention. It's completely arrogant. It supersedes the Hague Convention treaty on a local level, on a national level here. And it's like, well, wait a minute. So Holland is running off and doing its own thing with this treaty, and Germany is doing a whole different thing with it again. The UK, so we need this judicial oversight committee to make sure that all these countries are on the same page.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
I think also the feeling that I got with my experience in the UK courts is that they're almost happy to get your file off their table and let New Zealand deal with it because they don't know how to handle it. Yeah. They don't know really what to do. They're working within their legal framework, but I suppose compared to other criminal activities, we are relatively low in number, and some people are inexperienced. And they're quite happy to get rid of your file, pass it over to the other country. That's dealt with. That's off the table.
Right. And, in my particular case, once it was handled in the United States court says, well, the Hague court already dealt with it, right? So we're done talking about it. It's like, no, they didn't deal with it because they want you to deal with it, but now you're saying the Hague already dealt with it, so you're not going to deal with it. So basically no one's dealing with it. And my daughter now lives with an addicted, identified child molester. What's that? You know? Maybe in the rounds of mediation.
Nothing surprises me. Yeah.
Right.
Nothing surprises me anymore. It's shocking to admit it, but some of the 5-6 years ago, I'd thought, oh my God, how can such injustice go on? But nothing shocks me anymore. And that's a really scary world to live in for our children. Yeah,
no, it's a really good point. I'm thinking maybe, in the rounds of mandatory mediation, in these cross-border mediation sessions of Hague Convention trials, at that point, there needs to be a court psychologist who looks at the psychological profile of both the parents as well as the children. Any abuse that might be happening needs to be weighed in the decision. See, this is where that Article 13 should be coming in, and that's where that Hague Convention treaty just doesn't work, because they don't look at any of that, right?
No, but then also, from my experience, I don't really have any confidence in what the court psychological assessments say. In my case, I thought it was verging on ridiculous.
Yeah, that's another point. Yep.
Yes, you sort of have the faith in these systems, but the reality is, I feel like they will be supportive towards the father, especially if that father is a national of their country.
Well, that's why we need a judicial oversight committee, because at this point you should be able to file a complaint. Had such a committee existed, you should be able to file a complaint and show, look, this is what's happening. Here's the evidence that I'm, the Skype is used against me as a bargaining tool, as a tool of coercive control. In my situation, I should be able to complain and say, hey, I don't even know if my daughter's still alive. And at that point, that judicial oversight committee needs to step in and needs to have the authority to reverse custody. I'm trying to brainstorm of ways to reform the Hague Convention.
I feel that even though I had my access agreement, as I said, holidays once or twice a year, when we hit a stumbling block and my daughter's father was saying, no, she's not coming. No, she's not coming this year. Not having it. I was told by my New Zealand solicitor to contact the Central Authority because they had applied for the access order. Well, of course, the Central Authority said to me, well, it's not our problem now. Our job is to get an access order through the New Zealand court, which you've got. That's it. That's where we leave you now. We can't help any further. And I was like, what? So ultimately, it falls back to the court of the country of habitual residence. But there was a lot of my solicitor didn't even know if it was their job or not. So I almost feel like some of these access court orders, they're not worth the paper they're written on sometimes. And if a father wanted to make things very difficult, they could keep that going for quite a long time before anybody did anything.
Yeah.
That's
another
sad,
thing
but it's true.
That judicial oversight committee should also look at the role of the Central Authority, because there is a protocol that they should be adhering to, and they're totally not doing that whatsoever. And we need to have a platform where we can complain about these authorities completely dropping the ball on us.
The protocols aren't clear. They need to be clear, consistent, and some more points probably need to be added, you know, to cover international parents in a whole multitude of situations. But, you know, for the sake of the children concerned, these protocols need to widen and be more rigid.
Yeah,
I guess.
Exactly. So I know that Global ARC, the organization that we interviewed last week with Anita Duncan, is also working on this, and Anita is also calling in. So let me put her on because I'm interested to hear if she also has ideas on reforming the Hague Convention to facilitate us and our children in a more equal way. Hi, Anita, can you hear me?
Hi, Gerta. Yes, I'm happy to talk to you again this week. Thank you.
Hi, thanks for coming on Health for Children again and sharing any input on the topic that we're currently discussing, because we didn't really get to this topic last week when we were talking about Hague Convention. So what are your ideas about assessment and how we can improve the situation for mothers and children?
Yeah, thank you, Gerta. I was listening to that with interest. And first, let me just say that, Helen, I'm so sorry to hear your story. It's very, very sad and tragic for you and your daughter.
Yeah, I think they're all tragic, these stories.
It's a terrible situation for any mother or any parent to be in. And we have to remember that sometimes fathers are in this position, as you pointed out, Gerta. And at Global ARC, we do acknowledge that it can be fathers, of course, as well as mothers, but statistics do show it's overwhelmingly mothers, sadly. Now, you were just talking about assessment, Gerta, and I don't know whether you've heard, but in Britain over the last week or so, there's been a lot of news focus on the case, a very sad case of a 6-year-old girl who was murdered by her father a few years ago. He's just been sentenced to many years in prison, fortunately. One of the problems that has become apparent in this case, and I believe it's pertinent because it does apply to a lot of Hague Convention cases as well, is that the judges ordered independent assessment of the parents and of the child. Instead of listening to the social workers from the town she lived in who'd known her for many years, or possibly taking statements from her school teachers, listening to neighbours and friends, they decided to have a totally independent assessment. And my point here is that children and parents do not always open up to social workers when they've got perhaps 1 or maybe 2 or 3 one-hour meetings with them. It's very hard for children to develop that trust relationship. It's also very easy for either children or parents to hide what they're really thinking or saying, depending, of course, on the age of the child. But they might say what they believe. A parent might wish to hear or might wish them to say. A parent, of course, can pretend to be a wonderful person when, in fact, they've been abusing their partner. And the independent social workers, who have very little time to make their assessment, cannot possibly be expected to see through all this in the very limited time they have, whereas listening to, reading and talking to assessments made by reputable, trustworthy professionals who have known the children and the parents over a period of time, I believe, are worth far more than these independent assessments. So listening to social workers who've seen the children, met them in their home, met them at school, in safe locations, talking to teachers, doctors, even things like affidavits, which friends can make, of course, realizing that if you're a friend of one parent and not the other, your affidavit may be slightly biased, although obviously we would hope they wouldn't be. But still, I think you can read a lot from these kinds of things, and unfortunately judges, courts don't pay attention to this when perhaps they should.
Right, exactly. And so this kind of ties in with what Global ARC is doing. So can you hear me?
Oh, I've lost you. Hello?
Can you hear me? I'm not sure.
Hello?
Helena, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Goethe.
Anita can't hear us anymore. Not sure what's happening. I'm not sure. Helena, can you hear me?
Oh, I can still hear you, Goethe.
Anita can't hear us anymore. There's a bunch of echo going on. I'm not sure what's happening. Can you still hear me, Helena?
Yes, I can.
Okay. All right. We'll just continue to talk while Anita calls back in. There's kind of some weird echo going on, but yeah, she's bringing up a really good point about a proper assessment needs time, and these children need to build a trust relationship with a counselor who actually has real insight into what's going on inside the home. This is also, when my daughter was allowed to speak to the judge a couple of months ago in January, and I told the judge, feel free to talk to my daughter, but she's not going to tell you anything if she doesn't know you. If you're going to sit down with her for 10 minutes, she's not going to reveal sexual abuse if she knows that she's going to have to go home with the father who's doing that to her after the conversation. It's ridiculous.
Actually, that's interesting that the judge was willing to speak to your daughter. I know from...
Yeah, I think she just did that to get rid of me, to say, here, I've talked to your daughter. She knew that my daughter wasn't going to say anything, because, what's my daughter going to do?
Judges aren't willing or interested to actually speak to the child concerned. And I suppose this is a bizarre thing about this whole process, whether you're applying for relocation or the Hague Convention or, because you've abducted your child, the child actually isn't spoken to.
In my case, my daughter was allowed to testify twice in the Hague during the Hague Convention trial, and she testified twice that she had been abused and molested by her father, and that she'd rather die than ever see him again. And then the judges said,
extremely brave of her.
I know, very, very brave.
How old was your daughter at the time when she testified?
9.
9, gosh.
But then so the judges said, but the judges didn't take her testimony serious. So even though she testified twice, then they put in their court order, we think that this and that is going on, and everything that they concluded was opposite of what 7 experts had concluded.
So what is this going to teach your daughter? I speak the truth about something that is harming me or scaring me, and no one's going to take me seriously or believe me. How?
Well, she knows.
That's psychologically damaging her even further than she already is.
She knows that I took her serious, and she knows that the 7 experts that investigated her for 8 months took her serious, but she had no faith in the judges. And after the first court order came in, she was so incredibly distraught by their decision to return her that she even, she stopped eating. She developed a really bad stomach ache, and she had to be admitted to the hospital. So, this is the thing, right? So even when there's an assessment, like in my daughter's case, with 8 months of assessment, the judges still didn't even look at that. So let's
8
see.
months is a long time for a child to be going through that as well.
Yeah, and 8 months of 2 visits a week by a team of neurologists and psychiatrists and psychologists who put out 6 reports recommending no contact between father and daughter, and they still force her to return. What's that about then? And this is why I'm thinking.
Like either they don't know what they're doing, or they don't have any confidence in what they're doing, or maybe one court official has one opinion, but another one has a different opinion. They're being clueless.
Well, it's not even that. The judges in my particular case talked to Jasmine for 5 or 10 minutes and arrived at conclusions that were completely opposite of the conclusions by the child mental health experts. So they actually put themselves in the seat of being a child mental health expert, and thereby disregarding the expertise of a state mental health clinic and their own court psychologist and the psychologist in the United States. And they shouldn't even be allowed to do that because they are trained to implement the law, and they're not trained to be child psychologists. So they should just look at the reports and the evidence that's in front of them. And this is what's not happening. And that in all these family courts all over the world, expert evidence is not even looked at. It's not weighed.
No.
The children are considered property of the fathers.
Yes.
That is really
it's all about geographical jurisdiction. That seems to be the paramount thing.
Yes, jurisdiction, but it's also, always weighing the interests of the father over the interests of the child and the mother. So, and this is what Anita also touched on. She said the majority of the cases are mothers and children, and these fathers are always getting custody. I mean, what's the deal with that?
I'm thinking back to, an email. I think my ex-partner emailed me a couple of times over the years saying, my daughter needs to be returned to her rightful owner. But, actually, if you read between the lines of what he said regarding, never mind the emotion of the way he said it, but he honestly believes that he owns the child.
Yeah.
And that is kind of psychologically a strange way of looking at it, perhaps, because we're there to raise our child, not own them. When do you stop owning your child? It's not like having a dog or a car. It's a person.
Yeah.
But men like that, they think that way. That's how they're thinking.
It's not just men, the fathers. It's the entire system that supports that. I call that paternal fascism. It's patriarchal fascism or male supremacism. The interest of the fathers is paramount in all these cases. Instead of just looking at what's best for the child, right? That's what we should all be looking at. Instead of that, it's all about men having power, and women are not even allowed to raise their own children. I mean, what's that about?
And the scary thing is, the mothers that I've spoken to or read about, there's nothing wrong with them. They are fit, normal, interesting, intelligent, great mums. Mm-hmm. People that might hear these cases might think, oh, there must be more to it. There must be something wrong with the mother. But there's not. The reality is there really isn't. The mums are actually all fine. But because of the Hague Convention, the way the law's set up, it's giving the custody and the power to fathers that actually, they're not always great fathers. Some of them are really scary fathers and are doing wrong things on many levels. And it's nuts.
Well, speaking of ownership, Anita unfortunately wasn't able to call back in, but she's still with me on the chat on Facebook. And she's referring to a case, a mom named Sarah Kurtz, whose children were born in the United States to a Swedish father, and she won her Hague Convention case. So she, she had full permission to stay in the United States with her kids. But her ex abducted her children, and they were still, one was a toddler, another one was a breastfeeding baby. And he abducted them to Sweden, and the Swedish father told her, you have stolen, she had stolen her uterus containing his unborn child. Yeah, it's it's pretty crazy. And now the children are in Sweden with him, and the Swedish court is allowing him to keep the children there. It's an outrageous situation. And Anita, I'm seeing you on chat saying I don't know if she gave permission to use her name, but Sarah's been quite outspoken about her case, and she also testified in U.S. Congress about our case. So I'm hoping that she can get somewhere in Swedish court by appealing the decision. It just seems like we're all endlessly caught up in this, chasing the paper tiger, as it's sometimes called, where we end up becoming almost international experts in law, trying to figure out how to go from motion to motion, from court case to court case.
In a way, these situations are awful, but I'm glad that people are speaking up about it, and often people don't until they're at the end of their journey. There's nothing else they can do. The proverbial has hit the fan, and they're able to speak about. But for every one of us that does speak about, there's a lot of women. I'm going to say women and fathers as well, but that don't talk about it or can't talk about it because they're in the middle of court cases or they're scared of how their child's other parent might react, and they keep it hidden.
Well, they're often retaliated against by the courts for speaking out, and this is one of the reasons why I started the Hells for Children, to at least give the moms that are willing and able to speak out about their cases, to give them the opportunity to share their cases, to share their stories, because like you said, when you started sharing with friends and family and people you met what had happened to you, the reaction was like, how could this have happened? And people just don't know that this is happening with thousands and thousands of mothers all over the world.
I remember when I was in New Zealand, a lot of my UK friends said, go to the papers. This isn't right. And I said to my solicitor, I said, I'm seriously thinking about going to the media in the UK. And she went, oh, no, you mustn't do that. You can't do that. Absolutely not. The courts will not look favourably upon you if you apply for anything further for going to the media. And I thought, what? Because you don't want to look bad?
Exactly.
Or,
exactly.
You don't want any people to see how dirty this process is.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Well, your case
I didn't
was
at the time, but I...
Yeah, your case was published in the Daily Mail in the UK. And that was a good article. I read it. And interesting, when you scroll down to the comments, that's when you really see the public's opinion, where they have, immediately they have a judgment. They judge the moms for like, how come she didn't go back to New Zealand? And how could she have left her daughter? And to all those people putting out those negative comments underneath these articles, I have one thing to say. It's like, if you have not walked in Helene's shoes, do not judge her. You don't know what it's like to deal with a malignant narcissist.
I didn't read the comments at the time, and I still haven't. I read a few of them, but I just had to just not read it. It wasn't going to do me any favours. But yeah, I'm well aware that an outsider may think, what a selfish mother, what a selfish thing to do. But, I'd rather be here alive for my daughter in some capacity than dead, because I honestly know that I would be dead if I went back. I can talk about it okay now, but, at the time it was a nightmare, and it's not a decision anybody takes lightly.
Well, this is what happened to the Dutch friend of mine who made the same decision as you. She was in the exact same situation, and she said, you know what? If I go back to the States, which is where the children were with the father who had gotten full custody, she said, if I go back there, we're going to have a constant bullying situation. Because when she was still living in the States and they were going through their divorce, he would constantly interfere with every extracurricular activity the children had. Like he would pick the children up from from swimming lessons, and he would take off with them 10 minutes before she was supposed to pick him up, and then he would start a fight about it.
Return to a reign of terror. Nobody does.
Exactly.
I mean, I thought, I don't know, part of me thought, well, I'm not quite strong enough, although I would have considered myself a reasonably resilient character beforehand. But, when I speak to other people or, just in everyday life, and some people have their own situations, and I think, God, you know what? I did really well to keep it together for as long as I did. Because, in all honesty, I don't think many people would have lasted as long as I did. You did
the right thing. You chose to preserve your own life, which is in essence the first step you take when you are a protective mother. You need to look out for number one first. It's like being in an airplane that's about to crash. When you hear over the audio system, like, first put on your own oxygen mask and then put on the oxygen mask on your child. And that's exactly what you did,
Yeah.
And so even though people don't understand it, you did the right thing,
I know I did. I know I did for me and, my family. But it's funny, in these sort of cases, we know, as human beings, that, if the mum's happy, if the dad's happy, the children are going to be happy, or if the mum's a primary caregiver, if she's happy, children are going to do much better. But in Hague Convention cases, even when I was relocating, so technically it wasn't Hague, it was relocating, the happiness of the mother is actually not valued. I felt in my case it was swept aside, and I found that surprising and shocking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But then you don't want to go too bad. If you're too depressed or too upset or not coping, then they're going to turn that against you anyway. So you're damned if you do and damned if you don't. You'll never be able to win.
Absolutely. And we know that at some point our children are aged out of the Hague Convention, which is at age 16. So, my daughter has 3.5 years to go, and then she can just get on a plane and get out of there. And, same with your daughter. And at that point, they will rebuild that relationship with us, and then they have to take a look at what their fathers have done to them. And they will make their own conclusions about, the withholding of contact that the fathers put on them. I have full faith that my daughter will understand what has happened to her if she doesn't already understand it. You know what I mean?
I just think as children, they don't understand the gravity of it until they're maybe even late teens or early 20s. Mm-hmm. Because as children, you get on with it. And that, when my daughter came over for a visit recently in April, May, we had a few chats about how she was feeling and her life in New Zealand. And because she's a child, she gets on with it. I got the impression that life isn't always easy with her daddy at home, but she gets on with her friends at school. She gets on with what she needs to get on with because she's a child. Now, my reaction was, I miss you so much, and, you're not missing me as much. But then I thought, well, I'm glad because she's getting on with it because she's a kid. That's exactly what I want her to do.
Yeah.
But I know that when she gets older, she'll go, hang on a minute. Yeah. I remember when this happened and that happened and Daddy said this and, and it'll hit her and she'll probably be really angry with her dad. And I know a really good friend of mine wrote an email to her father saying, do you realise that one day Lily will understand what you've done and hate you for it?
Yeah.
You don't realise it now, but she will not like you for what you've done.
Yeah.
And his response was, I'm reporting you to the police for your email.
Yeah, well, whatever. These men, because we can't reach these guys, we cannot explain to these fathers that what they are doing might give them some kind of a power thrill in the short term, but in the long run, the kids know, they realize what has happened to them, and they, in most cases, from what I'm seeing, these children don't want to have anything to do with their fathers anymore once they are adults and they realize how they have been used. They don't want to have any contact.
Yeah, they're being used as pawns.
Yep, and they realize it. And that's the thing. These fathers will end up as, they'll probably spend their retirement very lonely for all the hate that they have been distributing in the lives of their children and the mothers of their children. If you really love your child, you want that child to have a healthy relationship, not just with the mother, but also with the grandparents and the uncles and aunts and the entire maternal family. And that's another issue that's often left out. It's, the maternal family, it's not just mom. There's so many other family members who are missing out on the child. Absolutely. And vice versa,
But they come second to their geographical jurisdiction, all these other family members, sadly. No. I was about to say something, but I can't remember.
Well, this is why the Hague Convention is also an outdated treaty, because when it was formed in 1985, we didn't have the type of global community that we have now. With the internet, we meet people all over the world. We travel more. We travel faster. It's much more international world. And that Hague Convention treaty is not fitted to that world anymore.
No, it needs updating.
Yeah, absolutely. And it needs updated in a way that mothers and children have equal rights to fathers, because at this point the fathers have all the rights and the mothers and children have none. So it seems, with the occasional exception.
I'm really grateful that the Central Authority did push for my holiday access court agreement, because I think without it, I think my daughter's father would have been extremely happy to completely sever me out of my daughter's life. Mm-hmm. I really do believe that he would have just cut me out completely. And I think he'd still like to. Certainly some of the things he says or emails are definitely stating and suggesting that. So, compared to some people, I'm very grateful for what I've got, even though it's not how I planned my child's life turning out at all.
No, I mean, your situation, you're not part of your daughter's life in the sense that you have a chance to raise her. And that is simply unfair and not healthy for the psychological and emotional development of your daughter. And that's just the way it is. These laws are totally not looking at any of the psychological consequences for the children.
No. At the end of the day, as her mother, I feel, very responsible for her emotional well-being. And I feel, extreme guilt over the way the situation has turned out. I have some good days and bad days still, but I feel, a mountain of guilt and sadness about how life is for my daughter without her mum being there every day.
Well, I can't tell you not to feel guilt, but my feelings about it, I can share them with you. I don't feel guilt personally, because I am not responsible for the way the Hague Convention treaty is an inhumane treaty. I'm not responsible for the fact that these judges are not looking at child abuse, child molestation, domestic violence. So
you're not.
Why should I don't feel guilty about it at all. I protected my daughter as best as I could after she disclosed the abuse and the molestation, and I don't regret 1 second of any decisions I've made along the way to continue to protect her. And the fact that authorities have facilitated her court abduction guilt is in their hearts. It should be less on their plates. They are guilty of facilitating child molestation, not me. You know what I mean?
You're quite right. It's disgusting is the word that springs to mind. When was the last time you spoke with your daughter?
May 9th, 2015.
Oh, gosh, more than a year.
It's more than a year.
And to tell you how her well-being is, she can't. I'm assuming that's because her father isn't allowing her to communicate with you.
I don't even know where she is. And I've called local law enforcement. They're not willing to help. I shared this during a hearing in January with the judge in the case, and she just said, well, that's a very serious matter. And I said, well, what are you going to do about it? And she said, nothing. And I have all this in transcripts as well, and the State Department is looking at this now, and some other some other people that are involved, because, this is now a reversed
it's so wrong. Situation. You are her mum. And although, you're using the word custody, but in my view, had immigration not had the red tape about your visa, you would, you could have been in America and you would have still seen your daughter, and you still have guardianship, I believe, because I still have, I'm recognised as her guardian, and as her mum and her guardian, you should still know where your daughter lives. I had the same issue with my daughter's father, who wouldn't tell me where she lives, wouldn't tell me what and I thought, well, if I want to send her something, where can I send it to? I want to send her letters and presents and photographs. And I contacted the solicitor in New Zealand who said, well, we can't make him tell you where he lives. And I said, yes, but you must know his address because you're writing to him as my solicitor. Well, actually, they're using email. But, something as fundamental as knowing where your child is living is really important. And I think that's another point that should be raised in the Hague Convention because, absolutely you should know where your child lives.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's wrong that you haven't got that information, and the worry and anxiety, you must be going through is not right.
This is the intent of the father of the the malignant narcissist father is for me to worry. So what it does for me is it grounds me in my spiritual belief that there is a greater power than us, who is looking out for my daughter wherever she is, whether she's even still alive or not. Her spirit is sacred, and this is what grounds me in that. Because if I sit here and worry all day long, that's just going to feed his power trip, And so the way to deal with a malignant narcissist is to shut off the supply, to the power thrill.
Absolutely right.
They feed off the power, and actually they've measured this in brainwaves of malignant narcissists. They feed off this power trip like drugs. It works like a thrill. It releases endorphins in the brain, and they actually enjoy every second that you're worrying and stressing about it.
Yeah. So I know exactly where you're coming from because I've experienced that as well, especially when I lived in New Zealand. They absolutely love, they somehow get a kick of when you're upset or riled up or, they finally get a reaction out of you. They feed off it.
Exactly. And so the key is, and this is interesting because I went to a meditation retreat for victims of narcissists, and the guy that was running the meditation retreat, he said, in India, when they have these gurus and they have, students who want to learn to be enlightened, they actually insert a narcissist in the group, a psychopath, to raise hell, because that's the fastest way for anyone to develop spiritually. Because once you're able to handle a narcissist, once you learn to shut off that control supply, you center in your heart space and you nurture your own spirit, and that's extremely important for all the moms that are listening right now.
It's really hard to learn that, I think, if you're dealing with a narcissist. In fact, I don't even think I've managed to learn it completely yet, but it takes a long time to learn it, and
it's a process.
It's not happening
overnight. It's a process, the key is to preserve your soul. The key is to preserve that light in your heart, and if you allow it to go out with depression and grief, it doesn't mean you're not going to be depressed and sad and angry, but the most important thing is that you allow that to pass through you and then come back to center and respect yourself and the love that you have for yourself and your daughter or your son or multiple children, because that in the end is what keeps the relationship with the child alive, and they feel that on a soul level that you love them no matter what, and that you're always going to be there for them, and that is what's going to be facilitating the reunion once your children do get in touch with you again. And hopefully they're not brainwashed to a point at that point that they've learned to hate you as well. That's a whole other aspect. We can do an entire show on that.
That's a whole other show. Parental alienation, and again, that's another form of abuse. And I certainly believe, my daughter has that on a daily basis. Some nasty, negative, horrible things said about me. And as she's getting older, she's questioning me about it, and I hope she's questioning her dad. But it's wrong. It's really wrong to do that to a child that's already got kind of, a life that's lacking in some aspects.
The children are definitely damaged from this, and they will need many, many years, if not a lifelong, of work on themselves. On future relationships that will be affected by all of this as a result, and we can only be there for them to be as supportive as we can in teaching them to nurture their own light and their own soul as they recover and heal from the material.
That's absolutely right, and that is a conscious decision that I made to remain in the UK, as difficult as it was, is that I knew either way, if I returned with her or not, she will, I can bet my everything this will happen. But, she's going to be emotionally upset and confused and going to need some help to help her feel okay in her self-esteem when she's older. Mm-hmm. And I know that me being here, I can be strong, I can be financially a little bit better off than I would if I remained in New Zealand. And I will be there ready for her when she's older to take her in my arms and help her be strong again. I know if I stayed in New Zealand, I would be beat. I would be wiped out. I wouldn't have the energy. But I know that I can help when she's older, when she really, really needs me.
Well, that's a wonderful note to end the show on. A really positive, constructive message also for all the other protective mothers that are listening. Stay strong, take care of yourself. Eventually the children will contact you again, and then that process of healing can start. And that will be, much more constructive if you're together, if you were able to maintain that light in your heart, maintain that strong soul connection with yourself and your children and people around you. So I want to thank you so much, Helena, for being on the show today and courageously sharing your difficult situation with us all.
Oh, you're more than welcome. Thank you for having me on. I was a bit nervous at first, but you know, I'm sitting here now and I'm feeling glad that I've shared my story.
Yes,
and hopefully it makes some other people feel a little bit better, and that, you know, they're not alone. This awful situation happens to more people than a lot of people think.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much, and thanks everyone for listening. And Helena, I hope your situation will resolve as soon as possible in a more positive direction. And I wish this for all the protected mothers who are listening. And I hope you all tune in next week on Health for Children when we are on CCN Live TV. So check it out on my timeline and on my website. And thank you all, and bye-bye, everybody. Bye-bye.